It also turns out that there are differences in lifetime labor force participation between men and women, and by the same demographic characteristics as there are differences in wages. So you see that single males and females have very similar patterns of work over their lifetimes. But married men and women have very, very different patterns of work. So that married males tend to work longer hours and more over their lifetime, whereas married women work less, and married women with children often work even less than that. And there are periods in which they drop out, married women with children drop out of the labor force to take care of children and then re-enter the labor market. And the data sets that I've looked at indicate that on average, married women with children drop out for about 10 years, at least in the United States. It's a little bit less than that now. So the question then really is there a link between lifetime labor force participation and wages? And it turns out that there's a whole theory in economics called human capital theory. And human capital theory is a explanation as to, or a model, we call it, of how individuals invest in themselves to acquire earnings power. And some of these investments, of course, are schooling and the type of schooling, and on-the-job training and the types of jobs one takes to get on-the-job training. And what clearly comes out of that theory is that the amount that one invests in, that is the amount of investment one makes, is related to the benefits which are related to your lifetime labor force participation. So if one intends to drop out of the labor force for some period of time, it lowers the benefits from investment and creates less of an incentive for investment. So that then has manifested itself in part by different occupational structure. And so in the old days, 40, 50 years ago, we found, at least in the US, very few women in certain professions. So in the old days, you found few women lawyers, few women in medicine, few women in dentistry. Nowadays, that's not the case. And if one looks in medical schools, dental schools, veterinary schools, it's close to 50% women nowadays. So things are changing. But what happens if one has an expectation of dropping out of the labor market, it affects the investments in the type of school one gets, it affects the investment in what kinds of jobs one takes, and therefore leads to a different earnings pattern over the lifetime. And that, I think, is one of the main causes of the gender wage gap. In fact, that's why it is that single males and females have a very small wage gap. Married males and females have a larger wage gap because they have very different lifetime labor force participations, and it gets exacerbated with children.